Hello friends, welcome to Learn. Today we will learn a new programming language, that is Ruby. Ruby is a purely object-oriented programming language where everything is an object and this object can be overridden. Ruby is one of the easiest language to learn and read. Some of its cool features are listed here in a screen. Ruby is purely object-oriented programming language. Ruby is a multi-platform language. You can run Ruby on Windows platform, Macintosh platform and in Unix platform like Fedora, CentOS and Ubuntu. Ruby is format-free language. So you do not need to consider the format of your code. You do not need to add semicolons at the end of the line. You do not need to consider about spaces, etc. Ruby has smart garbage collector functionalities and it is open source. Also, Ruby has an active community available. Ruby is an extensible language and it also supports multi-patching. If you do not like some behavior of the framework, then you can modify it. Today we will start with the installation of Ruby into your machine. This installation is based on the operating system that you are using. Here in this Ruby course, we will use Ubuntu operating system, that is a Linux based operating system. So we will see practicals how to install Ruby in next lectures. For further installation and documentation how to install Ruby, you can see this official documentation on its official Ruby site. Ruby Version Manager, often abbreviated as RVM, is an Unix-like system functionality that is used to manage multiple Ruby versions into your device. By using RVM, you can install multiple versions of Ruby and you can switch in between your Ruby versions by easily using RVM commands. Entire Ruby environment, including the Ruby interpreter, its gem files and its RI documentation, all are automatically installed to your local device by using RVM. Different versions of Ruby can be easily handled by RVM to make enable a developer to switch between different Ruby versions to work in different projects. RVM provides one feature, that is gem sets. Now what is gem sets? Gem set is a collection of gems that are used for different purpose. For example, if you are working on single project and you want to create a collection of gems, that is known as gem sets. So you can create different gem sets for your different projects. And this all the things can easily be done by using RVM. These gem sets can be associated with different projects. And to create this gem set, we need to create one file with the extension .rvmrc. How to install RVM? For installing Ruby Version Manager into our local system or in our local device, we need to perform 3 steps. You can see in a screen that the first step will add a PPA file to your local device. After adding the PPA file, we need to fire the second command that is used for updating the system, that is sudo apt-get update. This will update the systems and some dependent files. And finally, third and the last command that will install RVM to our local device. So by using these 3 commands you have seen in the screen, you can easily install Ruby Version Manager to your local device. One thing that we need to keep in mind while installing RVM is we need to restart our terminal after the installation of RVM. How to install Ruby to your local machine by using Ruby Version Manager? So before installing Ruby to our local machine, we first need to ensure that RVM is installed properly to your local machine. For checking this, you can fire any command of RVM. For example, you can use one command RVM list that will list out the Ruby that are installed to your local machine. If that responds successfully, it responds properly, it means that RVM is properly configured to your local machine and we are ready to install new Ruby version that we need. For installing new Ruby version, what we need to do is we need to fire one command RVM install and the Ruby version that we need to install. And by using this command, we can easily install Ruby. Actually, the syntax is RVM install and the version of Ruby that we need to install to our local machine. Here in a screen, you can see that I have written one command, that is RVM install 2.0.0. So this command will install Ruby 2.0.0 to my local machine. How to install RVM and Ruby. Also, we will see some practicals of RVM and Ruby. First of all, we will start our terminal. That we can search for terminal, and after starting our terminal, we will write our first command that will add GPG repository to our local machine. That we can do by using sudo apt add repository, then the PPA file, that is PPA RAEL-GC/RVM, and this will ask for password, that is local password of your system, and it will add the PPA file to our local machine. Here our GPG file is added and created to our local machine. Now we will fire sudo apt-get update command. This will update and fetch the library files to our local machine. It is 99% completed, and finally the library files were been added to our machine. Now we will install RVM by using sudo apt-get install RVM. This command will install RVM to our local machine. Now we will check if RVM is available to our machine or not. So for this we need to write one command, that is RVM-v, and it will display current RVM version that is installed to our local machine. Here it is 1.29.0. Now we will install Ruby by using RVM. For this we need to write one command, that is RVM install and the Ruby version that we want to install to our local machine. Suppose I want to install 2.0.0 and I am hitting enter. So it will search for binary Ruby files, and after searching files it will install Ruby to our local machine. Here it is processing, it is fetching files. Here the library files are being installed, like the curl, patch, makefile, patch file, curl URL, library files. Here it is showing the process, and finally our Ruby 2.0.0 is installed to our local machine. Now we will check how many or which Ruby versions are available to our local machine that are already installed. For this, what I need to do is I need to write one command, that is ruby-v. It will show me the Ruby version. To list all the Ruby versions available in our system, we are using RVM list command. It will show us the list of Ruby that are installed. So here we are having only one Ruby version, that is Ruby 2.0.0 available to our local machine. Now if I want to install another version of Ruby, so what I need to do is I need to write rvm install and my Ruby version, that is 2.3.0, and after hitting enter it will again doing the same process and fetch the library files and install to our local machine, and our Ruby 2.3.0 is installed to our local system. Some functions of RVM that we can use to easily switch between Ruby versions, and that helps us to deal with RVM. Here in a screen you will see some functions that I have listed. So the first function is used to use a specific version of RVM. So its syntax is like RVM use, and you need to specify the Ruby version that you need to use. For example, I want to use a Ruby version 2.0.0. Then in this case my command is rvm use 2.0.0, and rvm fires this command and make Ruby 2.0.0 as current version. If we want to know the path of Ruby where actually the Ruby is installed, in this case we can use the second command that you can see on a screen is which Ruby, that will return you the path of Ruby where actually the Ruby been installed. We can also set default version of Ruby. If we are working on multiple projects of different Ruby versions and there is some need that we can set a default version for Ruby. If I am not specifying any specific version of Ruby, it will defaultly take that Ruby version. So if we want to do such things, we can use the third command that you can see in a screen, that rvm default use and the Ruby version that you need to set as a default. Here in example, I want to set a Ruby version 2.0.0 as my default Ruby version. So in this case, what my command is rvm default use 2.0.0 and rvm set Ruby 2.0.0 as a default version for my local machine. If I want to check how many Ruby versions are installed in my local machine, I can easily check this scenario by using rvm list, and it will list out all the versions that are installed to my local system. So this is how we can work with RVM and its functions. Now we will see the different functions that are available and we can use of RVM. So first of all, the first one is listing the Ruby versions. How many Ruby versions are there in our local system? So for that we need to fire one command, that is rvm list. This will list out all the Ruby versions that are installed to our local system. Here in a screen you will see that we are having two versions. One is Ruby 2.0.0 and the second one is Ruby 2.3.0. Here it also shows the current and default version. Currently we are having 2.0.0 as a current and default version. Now we wanted to set the default version. Like currently we are having Ruby 2.0.0 as a default. Now I want to change the default version. For that, what we need to do, we need to fire one rvm command, that is rvm default use and your Ruby version, that is 2.0.0. Now we will see here, you can see the current and default version has been changed from Ruby 2.0.0 to Ruby 3.0.0. So by using this command rvm default use and your Ruby version, we can set our default version of Ruby. Now we wanted to check which Ruby version we are using. For that, we will use which Ruby. This will show us the path of the Ruby file where actually our Ruby has been installed. So our module was in user/share/rvm/ruby/ruby 2.3.0 and its bin folder, our library is there. So these are some basic commands of RVM which we generally use to deal with RVM functionalities, plus we can manage our Ruby version, which Ruby version we are using, exactly on which location the Ruby version is installed, and we can set the current and default versions of Ruby as well. So these are the basic functions of RVM. Each programming language has its own set and types of variable. Ruby supports 5 types of variable: local variable, global variable, instance variable, class variable, and the constants. Local variable: any variable that starts with underscore or contains a letter from small a to z is considered to be a local variable in Ruby. Local variable do not have its default value. We must have to initialize our local variables. For example, here in a screen you can see I have created 3 variables. First variable is name, that is all A to Z and in small letters. And I have initialized my variable with welcome to learn1. I have given that string to my variable name. Here my second local variable starts with underscore, that is underscore name, and I have assigned a string value to my variable, that is my name is learn1. The third variable, that is my underscore name, and I have initialized that variable with a numeric value 123. Global variables. In Ruby, global variable always start with a special symbol $. Global variable have its own default value, that is nil. So if we are not initializing our global variable, it will take nil as its default value. Global variable can be accessed from anywhere during the program execution. For example, here in a screen I have created 2 global variables. The first one is my global variable, and I have assigned a value learn1 to that variable. The second variable is your global variable, but here in my second variable I have not initialized it with any value, so its value is nil. Instance variable. What are instance variable? Any Ruby variable that start with a special symbol @ that is known as instance variable. Instance variables by default have a value that is nil. So if we are not giving any value while defining any instance variable, it will take nil as its default value. Instance variable belongs to its object itself. This means that each object has its own instance variable of that particular class. For example, you can see on a screen that I have created 3 variables. All 3 are instance variable. The first one is my instance variable with having one value learn1. The second one, that is your instance variable, and it has also one value, that is hi learn1. And for the third, I have created customer name, but I haven't assigned any value to that variable yet. So the value that is defaultly set for the third variable is nil. Class variables. So in Ruby, any variable that start with $sign is considered to be a class variable. This class variable can be accessible from anywhere throughout the class. So if you have created your class variable @application name, @application name, then that variable can be available to each definition of your class. Any of the three definition can access that global variable that is declared as a class variable. For class variable, we need to keep one thing in mind, that before using class variable, we must have to initialize that class variable. If we haven't initialized that class variable, and if we are trying to use that class variable into our definition, for example, I have definition is sum. In that sum definition, what I am doing is I am doing sum of two values, but I am also adding pi as a summation value. Now the pi value that I need to define and I need to initialize to my class variable. So before I use that variable in my definition sum, I must have to initialize that pi variable as a class variable. Here in an example, you can see I have created two separate class. One is customer and second, that is orders. In a customer class, I have created one class variable, and that class variable will be used by the orders class, because we are having inheritance here. So the orders class will be inherited from the customer class. So this relationship is kind of one customer is having multiple class. So in that order class, we can easily access that class variable @customer name, because that will be inherited from the customer class itself. Any variable that start with capital A to Z, that will be considered as constant in Ruby. So this is the main priority thing that we need to consider, that we cannot define any constant with lowercase value. Here you can see in an example that I have created one constant variable that contains A to Z, that are all in uppercase. Also, if we are having class level constant, then we can use that constant by double colon, that we can technically termed as a scope resolution operator. So by using that scope resolution operator, we also can use constant of different class as well. Here in example, we can see I have created one class customer, and in that class I have created one constant variable name and given a value that is learn1. As we know, each and every language has its own data types. Here in Ruby, we are having several types of data types. For example, we can say boolean, number, string, symbols, hashes, array, etc. So now we will look each of these data types in some more details. So let's start with boolean. Boolean is a very common data type for all the languages. If you are using Java, PHP, .NET or any language, boolean is almost there as a data type. Here the boolean data type will have two values. One is true and second one is false. So it can take either true or false. We cannot assign both the values at the same time to a single boolean variable. Here in example, we can see I have created two variables. First one is delivered and second one is received. The first variable is delivered is having value true, and the second variable, that is received, is having value false. Now we will see practical examples of boolean. Let's create one variable, that is my variable, and assign one value, that is true. So here my variable will be created as a boolean. If we wanted to check its class, its base class, we can check dot class. It will return true class. If any boolean variable is having value true, then its base class is true class. Now let's create another variable, that is your variable, and we will assign a value false to it. Now this variable belongs to one class, that is false class. So let's check it. Your variable dot class, it will return us its base class, that is false class. Number is a data type which contains a series of digits. Now we can assign positive numbers, we can assign negative numbers, even we can assign decimal numbers to our variable. So this number data type can contain positive, negative, decimal values. Even if we wanted to separate our thousands number with underscore, then we can use it easily. So instead of comma, we can use underscore as a separator in Ruby. Here in example, we can see that I had set one example with separated as a underscore, that is 56,678. So this is an example of number, how we will use this data type with Ruby. Now we will see practical examples of number. So let's create one variable and assign one value 1, 2, 3 and enter. This will create one variable with data type number. If we wanted to check this variable's base class, we can check by using this class method. Here we can see it will belong to an fixed num class. Now I want to create one variable with negative value. So we can create and assign some negative value. Then this will create one variable with negative data. This will create one variable with number data type and having negative values. Now I want to create one variable with decimal values. Enter. This will create one variable with decimal values, but that is actually belongs to a number data type. And if we are checking its class, that will be a float class, because we have assigned decimal numbers to this. Even we can create decimal values as a negative also. For example, I am creating my fourth variable and I will assign one negative plus decimal value, accept that value, and it is also belongs to that fixed num class. Now if I want to check its base class, we can easily use that class method and it will return float, that is actually the base class. In Ruby, any variable that start with a special character colon, that will be considered as a symbol. For example, you have created one variable name, and if you assign colon, then it will convert to a symbol. So now any symbol will must start with a special character colon. Symbols cannot change its value at runtime. Symbol is actually derived from a base class symbol. If we have written any string and we want to convert that string to a symbol, then Ruby provides us one default method that will help us to convert one string to a symbol. For example, I am having one string as a your name and I want to convert that string to a symbol. So in this case, what I will need to do is I need to write your name as a string and perform one method, that is to_sym to that string. So that string will be converted to a symbol. Symbols are immutable, so we cannot override its actual value. Symbols are mostly common for most of the programming languages. Here in example, I have created two examples for symbol. First is hello world and second one is customer name. Now we will see practical examples of symbol. Any variable that is preceded with an special character colon will be considered as symbol in Ruby. So let's create our first variable, that is a symbol data type, that is of actually the symbol data type. We will create first variable. So this is how we can create symbols. If we wanted to check its base class, then we can check via using the class method. Here it will return symbol. So this is how we can easily create our symbols. If I am having string, for example learn1, and I want to convert this learn1 to a symbol, what I need to do is I need to put one method, that is toSym, and we can easily convert this learn1 variable as a symbol. So if I want to check its class, here it will return a symbol, that is the base class of that string. Initially this variable learn1 is actually belongs to string class, and by using this symbol method toSym method, we have created this string to symbol, and now its class belongs to symbol. So this is how we can work with symbols. Most of programming language has this data type. Even you can go for Java, PHP or .NET, any language, array is there. But here the definition and the functionality of array is somewhat different than other languages. So an array is a collection of multiple different objects in Ruby. Array is enclosed in square brackets and its values are separated by comma. Array index always starts from 0 and goes up to n-1. So if I have declared an array with total 10 values, then its index starts from 0 and goes to n-1 equal to 10 minus 1, that will be 9. So its an index value is ranged from 0 to 9. Here in a first example with having 5 elements, I want to access the element second, but its actual index value is 1. So what I need to do is I need to write the variable name and pass an index as an argument in square bracket. So for accessing the second value, I need to pass 1 because index always starts from 0. Same for the second example. The name of the second variable is last array with having 7 elements, and from that 7 elements I want to use the fourth one, that is 456.78. That is a fourth number, but its actual index is 3. What I need to do is put a variable name, that is last array, and into the square bracket I will add the element index, that is 3. So it will show me the fourth element from that array. Now we will see examples of array. So here I will create our first array variable, that is first array, and assign some values, for example 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. These are the values. So this is how we can easily create arrays in Ruby. If we wanted to check its base class, we can use that class method and we will find that this first array variable belongs to base class array. Now I want to access this 5 value. So for that we need to take one thing in a consideration, that array index always start from 0. So accessing this 5th element, what I need to do is I need to give an index as an argument. So here I will give 4, that is actually the index, and it will return me my desired output, that is 5. So this is how we can work with array. We can create array of multiple objects as well. For example, let me create another variable and assign one value 1. These all are the different variables. So this second variable contains different objects as its elements. The first one is numeric, second is string, third is symbol, fourth one is an boolean. Here again we are having number, boolean, string, etc. And if we want to check its class method, that will again return us an array. Now if I want to use this learn one, I want to show this learn one, I want to fetch this learn one value from my array. What I need to do is I need to give an index of this learn one element, that is 8. So its actual index is 7. So to access this learn one value, I need to pass its index as an argument, and here this is the 8th element, so its index is n-1, that is 7, and we will have our desired output as learn one. So this is how we can work with arrays. Hashes are same as arrays. Arrays store its value by using index, while hashes store its values using key and value pair. So the main difference between array and hash is hash uses key value to store its values. We can store multiple objects of different types to our hash. Hashes assigns value to its keys. So if I want to use some values, for that I need to use it by using keys. So here in example you can see that I have created two hashes, first hash and second hash. The first hash contains keys that are strings, but the second hash, that is, contains symbols as a keys. So for hashes we can create hash with two types. We can add keys as a string and we can add keys as a symbols also. How to access elements of hash? For accessing elements in hash, we need to access by using keys. For example, here in my first example, I want to use my value foo. For using foo value, I need to pass its relevant key. Here in example, the key is 1. So what I need to write is put s and my hash name, that is first hash, and I need to pass the key into the bracket, that is 1 here in my example, and it will return me my desired output, that is foo. Suppose I want to access a second variable, that is bar. I want to access bar value from my second hash. So for that what I need to do is I need to write my hash name, that is last hash, and also need to key related to that value bar. So here the key is 2 and it is symbol. So I need to pass that symbol into my brackets. So last hash, and into the bracket I will pass a key, that is 2, and it will return me a value bar. So this is how we can easily work with hashes. Now we will see practicals of hash. Let's create our first variable, that is of data type hash. So our name would be first variable and we will create hash. So the key value pair that we need to generate, our key is first and its value is 1. Let's create one another pair, that is key is actually a second and its value is 2. Let me add third pair, third, and its value, and this is how we can create hash. So our hash is ready. Now if we want to check its base class, we can use class method first dot class, and it will return its base class, that is hash. Now I want to access its second pair, that is its value is 2 and its key is second. So what I need to do is I need to write variable name and pass its key as argument, and it will return the value of that key, that is 2. So this is how we can work with hash. Now let's create one another hash that is having symbols as a keys. For example, second variable, and we will create symbols as their keys. For example, 1, this is a key, that is 2, and its value. So to access its value, for example, I want to access this first element, what I need to do is I need to pass its variables key. Actually here we are having symbol, and it will return our variables value, that is 1. Hashes are also used to store different data, different objects. So let's create a third variable, and this variable is having symbols as a key, and its value is 1 2 3. Let's create one another pair, 2, and its value is learn1. Let's create one more, that is third key value pair, and its value is boolean. Let's also create fourth key value pair, and its value is in decimal, for example 456.23. and this is how we can create an hash with different objects. And to access, here I want to access learn1, so for that I need to put these two as a parameters, and it will return learn1. So this is how we can work with hash in Ruby. Strings are used to represent so many characters at the same time. If you want to write some lines, if you want to write some paragraph, or if you want to write some word, in this all scenario you will create string. So string actually belongs to a class named as a string. String is a data type that represents a text. String literals are enclosed in single quote or in double quote. You can create string in either way. You can create string by using single quotes, or you can create string by using double quotes. Here in a screen you can see I have created two examples. First variable that contains a string hello world, and second, that is last string, that contains a value how are you. So this is how we can easily work with strings in Ruby. Now we will see practicals of string. Here let me create our first variable, that is first variable, and its value is hello learn1. So this is how I can create one variable that is of string data type. If I want to check its base class, I can use class method and it will return us string. Suppose I want to create another variable, second variable, and I will assign value how are you, and it's done. So this is how we can easily work with strings in Ruby. Object-oriented Ruby. Ruby is pure object-oriented programming language. So here in Ruby, everything is object. If you are creating some variable, you are creating some objects, that all belongs to some class, because they are actually the object. As Ruby is an object-oriented language, it has some technical terms such as class, objects, methods, etc. So now we will see each of them in some details, like how to create class, how to create our own custom definitions, how to create methods, how to inherit some classes into another class, and how to create objects. Ruby classes. To create a class in Ruby, we need to write one keyword, that is class. So any Ruby class that starts with a keyword class followed by the class name, and class terminated with the keyword end. For example, if I want to create one user class, here in a screen you can see I have created one user class. So I had added one class, that is a keyword, and my class name, that is user, and the class terminated with a word end. In between the start and end, we can create our custom methods, we can create our variables, and we can use our logic to perform particular operations. One thing that we need to keep in mind is the class name must start with an uppercase letter. For example, if I am creating one class named as a learn one, then the first letter of my class, that is L, will be in capitalized form. Ruby classes. To create a class in Ruby, we need to write one keyword, that is class. So any Ruby class that starts with a keyword class followed by the class name and terminated with the keyword end. For example, if I want to create one user class, here in a screen you can see I have created one user class. So I had added one class, that is a keyword, and my class name, that is user, and the class terminated with a word end. In between the start and end, we can create our custom methods, we can create our variables, and we can use our logic to perform particular operations. One thing that we need to keep in mind is the class name must start with an uppercase letter. For example, if I am creating one class named as a learn one, then the first letter of my class, that is L, will be in capitalized form. Ruby objects. An object is created from class. Objects are concrete instance of class. We can create objects by using a method that is new. Objects provides a blueprint of class. For example, here in a screen I have created two objects that are of user class. The first is user underscore 1, and that will have a value user.new, and second is user2, and again it is having same value user.new. In next lecture we will learn about the methods in object-oriented Ruby. Ruby object-oriented methods. So there are mainly three types of methods available in Ruby. If we consider, first is initializer method, second is instance method, and the third and last one is class method. So now let's take a deep dive to each and every methods in some details. Initializer method. In Ruby, whenever we are going to create any object or any object creation beyond any property or any method, in that case it will directly fire one method that will be called automatically, and that's the method that we can say that it's an initializer method. Whenever any initialization of object is there in Ruby, it will automatically call that method with having the parameters. For example, I am having one class named as a user, right, and I am having one field as a name. Now I want to initialize my user variable, my user object, as a default value. Let me say I want to store learn1 while my object is initialized. So what I need to do is I need to create one initializer method. What it actually do is whenever any object is created, it will call that method and set the default value to the name, that is learn1. So in this case, if during the execution I just forgot to pass a name, or I just forgot to assign the default value name to any object, it will automatically assign that values. So this is the use of initializer method that will call on an initialization of any object. Class and its method. In Ruby, everything is object. So each and every object belongs to any class. For example, string, boolean, hash, etc. And in Ruby, we are having rich sets of predefined built-in libraries, predefined built-in class that we can use to develop our code. In Ruby, a class is defined by a specific keyword class. Any Ruby class is started with a first capital letter. So if we wanted to add some small letter, then that is must compulsory to start a class name with a capital A to Z uppercase letter. For example, we can see in a screen I have created two examples. First is learn1, that's a L and V both are in a capitalized form, and in second we are having user object. So U and O both are in capital letter. So this is how we can add or we can create class names. In Ruby, for class names we are using camel case. We can see in a screen the syntax how actually the class is defined. We need to write the predefined keyword class and the class name, and the definition ends with again a predefined keyword of Ruby, that is AND. The variables and the methods that we are going to define into our class definition, that all are in a snake case. So we are not using upper letter or we are not using camel case for defining our methods and class. For example, I want to create one variable which is having some longer name, so I can add an underscore in between to that names. For example, learn_1, so it's kind of learn1 user underscore object. So this is how class methods and variable names has been defined into the Ruby class definition. How to create instance of a class? So for creating instance of a class, we are using a method of Ruby that is new. So by using this new method, we can easily create an instance of any class. For example, my class name is user and I want to create an object. I want to create an instance of that user class. So what I need to do is I need to write the class name, that is user, and the new method. So user.new, this will return an instance of user class. The new method that we are using is always returns an object, an instance of the defined class. Here in the screen you can see the example that I have created one instance. In this example, my class name is learn1. So I have created one variable learn1 object equal to my class name, that is learn1 dot the method, that is new, and that will return an instance of my learn1 class. How to define and call the methods in Ruby? So in our class, mainly we are having two types of method. First is instance method and second is class methods. There is also one another method, that is an constructor type of method that we have previously seen, that is initializer method, that we have seen in previous tutorial. In Ruby, any method will return an object. Now this object can be of any type. For example, it's an object of string, it's an object of number, it's an object of hash, etc. In Ruby, we do not need to specifically write the return keyword. So for example, if you forgot to write an return statement into your method definition, Ruby will return the value of last executed statement as an return value. Attribute reader, attribute writer, and attribute accessor. Attribute reader is mainly used to read the instance variable's value, and it will return its value as a string or as a hash or any Ruby class that will return to us. Here in a screen you can see in an example, I am having one class. I have created one class, that is learn1, and I have created one attribute reader method, and that is name. So whenever I am writing this statement, it internally creates one method to reading the value of that name variable, that name instance variable. So here in a screen you can see how this method is actually being created by Ruby automatically. When we write attribute reader and the instance variable, it will create one method with that same instance variable name. Here in a screen you can see that it has created a definition of name method. For example, def name, and it will return the instance object, instance variable, and it will return the instance variable @name. So this is how attribute reader works. Attribute writer. When we want to assign a value to our instance variable, in this case we are using attribute writer. Here I have one class named as learn1, and I am writing a statement for accessing and assigning a value to my name instance variable. So what I need to do is I need to write attribute writer and my instance variable name. So here that instance variable is name. Here you can see the same thing in the screen as well, and that will internally create one new method. How that method looks, you can see on the screen that whenever I am writing that method, it will translate it to a new method definition. The newly translated definition contains one parameter. That parameter is the value that we want to assign to my instance variable. So here it will create one definition that will take one parameter as a value and assign that value to our instance variable. So here that instance variable is @name, and this is how attribute writer works in Ruby. Attribute accessor. When we want to perform both the read and write operation on our instance variable, we are using attribute accessor. So now what actually this attribute accessor doing is, it will internally translate our statement into two separate definitions. First definition, that is used to read our value, so it's an same kind of attribute reader, and the second method that it will translate it, that is attribute writer method. So it will write one definition to assign a value to our instance variable. So here in a screen I am having one class named as a learn1, and what I am doing is I am writing a statement for attribute accessor, and my instance variable name is name. So what internally actually that is doing is, it will create two separate methods. The first method that is used for reading the value of my instance variable. same as attribute reader that we have seen in previous slides. And the second method definition that it will create is of attribute writer that we have seen just before few minutes ago. So this is how attribute accessor works. Class methods. In Ruby, any method that will be called upon a class that will be known as class methods. These class level methods can be accessed throughout the program from anywhere. What just we need to do is we need to call that class dot the execution name of the method, and in this way we can easily handle and work with class methods. So here in a screen you can see an example. In this example you can see that I have created user class and one self dot method. What this actually do is it will take two parameters as an argument, first name and last name, and that will concatenate to that both the variables and return us the string. So whenever I want to call this method, what I need to do is I need to write the class, that is user dot the method name, and we can easily access the class level methods. For the class level methods, one thing that we need to keep in mind is every class level method must start with a predefined Ruby keyword, that is self. So for example, I want to create one method get full address. For that I need to write def self dot my method name. So this is a basic level syntax that we need to consider while working with class level variable. In instance level methods, we see that we do not need to specify any predefined keyword while defining a method. Class level methods in Ruby. So let's take a practical example of class level method in Ruby. So let's create our first class, that is class user. In this user class I am creating one class level method, that is full name or else simple full name. So for this I need to define my method with using predefined keyword self dot full name, and that will takes two parameters, first name last name. And here in a method definition I will combine this both the parameters, first name last name. And let's put one comment over here. Let me say method that returns full name of user. And now here we will create a call to our defined method full name. So for that what we need to do is we will create a user object. Let's take a name as user object and user my class name and the method name, and this will take two parameters, suppose hello, and the second one is learn. And now let's print this output to our console. Put as user object dot inspect. This is how we can create method. So by seeing this keyword self, we can see that this method full name is actually a class level method. So now let's run this program. Ruby object oriented my file name, and here we can see the output. That method has been called on the class name and it has returned both the parameters in a single string, that is hello is my first parameter and I had put a space, and now the second parameter, that is learn one. So this is how we can work with the methods in Ruby. Second method of Ruby is instance method. Now what is instance method? Instance method are the methods that are called upon Ruby instances. Suppose here I have created one instance method. So to call that method, I need one object of particular class. For example, I want to call get full name method of my user class. What I need to do is, first I need to create an object of the user class, and then only I can be able to call that get full name method of that user class. So here in example you can see on a screen that I have created one user class having true properties, and when I was creating one new object, and on that object what I am doing is I am firing a method that is get full name, and that will fetch the full name of the user. It will combine first name, put a middle space, and then again append the last name. So in this way we will have full name of the user. So this is a practical example how we can deal with these instance methods. So let's start with initializer method. So as I have already told you that initializer methods are the methods that works as a constructor, same like a constructor. Let's create one class named user, and in this user class I am creating one initializer method. Initializer method, and here is the definition of that method. Now I am adding some more functionality to it. Let me say name and email, these two parameters, and here I am creating one variable name and email equal to email. Now here let's create one instance method, that is, let me say this method is for getting username. So definition would be if get username, and it will return name. So this is our definition of instance method. And now here below we will first create an user object, and on that object we will fire this method. So let's create one object, that is user name user dot new, and we will pass two parameters as we have initializer method, that is learn1 is my name, learn1, and my email is hello@learn1.com. This will fire my method initializer method, and now here I am accessing this instance method on my new object, that is user name. User object equal to username dot get username, and here I will print this out, put as my name is, and user object. Now let's run this program. So we need to again go to the console, and we need to reach to the directory where the program is created, and need to fire the command ruby and our file name. Fire it again. So here we will see the output, my name is learn1. So this is how we can work with instance method in Ruby. What we need to do in mind is, first of all, we need to define the instance method that will be called upon the object of any class that you want to create, and then after we will work with instance method. So this is how we can work with instance method. So now let's take a look on the class level methods. So main thing for class level method that we need to define is the class level method must start with one predefined Ruby keyword, and that is self. So let's do a practical example how we can work with class level methods in Ruby. In next lecture, we will learn about the theory part of class methods.